September 1904. St. Louis was hosting the World's Fair. The city had spent 3 years preparing, widening streets, laying new rail lines, constructing exhibition halls that the newspapers called the greatest gathering of human achievement in the Western world. On the morning of September 14th, a maintenance worker named Otto Frenzel was conducting a routine inspection of the sub-basement level of the old St. Louis post office on Olive Street when he found a door he had not seen in 11 years of working in that building. The door was at the end of a utility corridor that the building's maintenance logs described as a dead-end mechanical chase. It was not a dead end. Beyond the door was a vaulted room, approximately 12 feet by 10, with a ventilation grate in the ceiling and a single gas lamp fitting on the eastern wall. The lamp had been used recently enough that the glass was still darkened with soot, and in the corner of that room, on a folded canvas postal sack, was a child, a boy, by Frenzel's account, somewhere between 7 and 10 years of age. He was alive, he was dressed, he was, in Frenzel's word, calm. He did not speak when Frenzel entered. He did not move toward the door. He looked at Frenzel and waited. The official record of what happened next is 4 sentences in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's case log for September 14, 1904. Those 4 sentences say that a child of unknown age and identity was recovered from the sub-basement of the Federal Post Office building on Olive Street, was examined by a police physician and found to be in adequate physical health, was transferred to the custody of the St. Louis Municipal Children's Home on South 6th Street on the same day, and was subsequently placed with a family in the metropolitan area. The case log entry carries a reference number. That reference number does not appear in any subsequent document in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department archive. It does not appear in the Municipal Children's Home Intake Register for September 1904. It does not appear in any court placement record, foster care ledger, or adoption filing for the city of St. Louis for the calendar year 1904. A child was found in a locked vault beneath a federal building. That child entered the official record as 4 sentences. Then, the child's existence, as a traceable fact in any institutional document, stopped entirely. Otto Frenzel was not a man given to dramatizing what he saw. He had worked in building maintenance for the Federal Postal Service since 1893, first in Cincinnati and then in St. Louis. His employment record, held in the records of the United States Post Office Department at the National Archives in Washington, under Record Group 28, shows 11 years of uninterrupted service with no disciplinary notations and 2 commendations for thoroughness in mechanical inspection work. He was 44 years old on the morning of September 14, 1904. He was the kind of man who noticed a door that had not been there before, wrote it in his inspection log, and then went to look at what was behind it. He filed a written account of his discovery with the Post Office Department's Regional Facilities Superintendent on the afternoon of the same day. That account was received and logged. Within 3 days, Otto Frenzel was transferred from the St. Louis facility to the Federal Post Office in Springfield, Missouri. The transfer request is in his employment file. The reason given on the transfer documentation is operational need. There is no corresponding vacancy at the Springfield facility in the staffing records for that period. They transferred him because there was no operational need. They transferred him because he had filed a written account. If the buried record is what brings you here, subscribe and tap the notification bell before we go further. We pull threads like this every week. The children who vanished from the official ledger, the buildings that held things no building was supposed to hold, the documentation that exists and says something no institution wants to have said. If that is the kind of history that matters to you, you belong here. To understand what a child was doing in a locked vault beneath the St. Louis Post Office in September of 1904, we have to go back to a period in American institutional history that is almost never discussed in those terms. The late 19th and early 20th century management of children who, for reasons ranging from poverty to immigration to parental death to circumstances that were never documented at all, fell outside the networks of family, church, and community that constituted the only genuine social safety structures of that era. The official history of this period frames it as the Progressive Era, a time of social reform, of child labor legislation, of the settlement house movement, and the earliest federal interest in children's welfare. That framing is accurate for children who remained visible, whose circumstances were documented, whose names were recorded somewhere. What the official framing does not engage with is the population of children who were not documented, who appeared in no census, no church register, no school enrollment record, no asylum intake ledger, who exist in the historical record only when something exceptional forced their presence into an official document, a police case log, a coroner's report, a brief newspaper item, and who disappear from that record just as quickly when the institutional response concluded. The scale of this undocumented population is difficult to reconstruct, precisely because it was undocumented. What the records that do exist allow us to infer is that it was not small. The 1900 Federal Census Enumeration Instructions specifically note that enumerators should record all persons residing in a dwelling on the census date, including children whose names were unknown to the head of household. That instruction appears because the Census Bureau had encountered in the 1890 enumeration a pattern of children present in households whose names the head of household either could not or would not provide. The 1900 census is the first to include a column for the relationship of each listed individual to the head of household. Its introduction was a direct response to the discovery that prior census records contained a statistically significant number of individuals, predominantly children and young persons, whose presence in a household could not be explained by any documented familial, employment, or legal relationship. They were simply there. And in 1904, in the sub-basement of a federal building in the most visited city in America, during the most attended World's Fair in the country's history, one of them was found by a maintenance man who happened to try a door. The St. Louis Post Office building on Olive Street was not a minor facility. It was the largest federal building in Missouri, constructed between 1872 and 1884 at a cost of more than $3 million, designed by the Office of the Supervising Architect of the United States Treasury Department under Alfred Bolt Mullet. Its sub-basement level was built as a secure currency and document vault system for the joint use of the Postal Service and the federal courts, both of which occupied the building. Access to the sub-basement was controlled through a separate key system maintained by the facility's senior custodian and logged in a daily access register. That register for September 1904 is in the National Archives Record Group 28. The page for September 14, 1904, shows 3 sub-basement access entries before Otto Frenzel's inspection. Frenzel's own entry is the 4th. The 3 entries before his are logged to 2 named Postal Service employees and 1 entry marked official business with no name, no department, and no signature. That entry is the only such notation in the September 1904 access register. Every other entry in that register for the entire month carries a name or a department designation. 1 entry, on the morning of the day the child was found, carries neither. The child had been in that room, based on the condition of the gas lamp fitting and the canvas sack, for more than 1 day, possibly several. The ventilation grate in the ceiling connected to a shaft that drew from an exterior air intake on the building's north wall at ground level. The room was not a standard vault compartment. The building's original construction plans, filed with the Office of the Supervising Architect in 1872 and held in National Archives Record Group 121, do not show that room. The room does not appear in the 1872 plans. The 1879 amended plans following a partial reconstruction of the sub-basement, or the 1891 facility survey commissioned by the Treasury Department. A room that is in a federal building that has a gas lamp fitting and a ventilation shaft that appears in no construction plan across 3 separate architectural surveys spanning 19 years, was not built by accident. It was built and then not noted. That is the difference between an omission and a decision. The Municipal Children's Home on South 6th Street maintained intake registers from 1887 through 1932, when it was consolidated with another city facility. Those registers are in the Missouri State Archives under the collection designation St. Louis Municipal Social Services Records, 1880-1940. They are detailed documents, name or designation of each child, approximate age, date of arrival, attending staff member, and the name of any referring authority. The register for September 1904 contains entries for 11 children who arrived during that month. None of those 11 entries corresponds to a child transferred from federal custody on September 14th. None references the police department case number from Frenzel's discovery. None describes a child recovered from the Olive Street post office. The police case log says the child was transferred to the Municipal Children's Home. The Municipal Children's Home register says no such child arrived. Both documents are in public archives. Both cannot be true. One of them was written to account for a child who was taken somewhere else. But here is what makes this case different from a simple gap in institutional record-keeping. In October of 1904, 6 weeks after Frenzel's discovery, a postal inspector named Raymond Colwell filed a routine quarterly security audit of the Olive Street facility. That audit is in National Archives Record Group 28. It covers the building's key inventory, access log compliance, vault seal integrity, and what the audit template calls special facilities, a category that, in the standard quarterly audit format used by the Post Office Department throughout this period, refers to document storage areas with non-standard access protocols. In every quarterly audit of the Olive Street facility between 1898 and 1903 that survives in the archive, the special facilities section is brief, 2 or 3 lines confirming the inventory of document storage compartments and their compliance status. In the October 1904 audit, the special facilities section is blank, not completed with a standard notation, not marked as not applicable. Blank, Raymond Colwell was a thorough inspector. His other quarterly audits are among the most detailed in the regional archive for that period. He left one section blank in one audit, in the quarter immediately following the discovery of a child in an uncharted room in the building he was auditing. That blank is not a clerical oversight. A blank in a document that meticulous is a choice. Colwell's case is not the only instance in which a federal building's maintenance record conceals rather than reveals an anomalous sub-basement discovery in this period. In 1897, a maintenance crew working in the sub-basement of the federal courthouse in Cincinnati, Ohio, encountered a sealed compartment during a drainage repair that did not appear in any building plan. The supervising foreman filed a report with the building's federal custodian. That report is in National Archives Record Group 121 under Courthouse Maintenance Records, Ohio District, 1890-1910. The custodian's response, attached to the same file, directs the foreman to seal the compartment, restore the drainage work, and note the compartment in no subsequent maintenance document. That instruction is in the file. The compartment is not mentioned again in any Cincinnati federal building record after 1897. In 1911, a similar discovery at the federal building in Louisville, Kentucky, produced a nearly identical institutional response: a foreman's report filed, a supervising official's instruction to seal and not note, and a complete absence of any subsequent reference in the building's maintenance record. Louisville, 1911, National Archives Record Group 121. The instruction is there. The compartment it describes is not. These are not coincidences across 3 federal buildings in 3 river cities over 14 years. These are instances of an institutional response, practiced enough to have a procedure, applied consistently enough to produce identical paperwork, and implemented quietly enough that no published history of any of the 3 buildings has ever noted it. This is not coincidence. This is a pattern. The United States Post Office Department has never adequately addressed the absence of any construction record for the room where the child was found in its 3 separate architectural surveys of the Olive Street facility between 1872 and 1891. It has never explained why the unsigned sub-basement access entry on the morning of September 14, 1904, the only undocumented access in the entire September register, was not investigated as part of the police case or the internal facilities review that followed. It has never explained why Raymond Colwell's October 1904 audit contains a blank special facilities section when every other audit of that facility in the archive does not. Why did the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department assign a case reference number to the discovery of a child in a federal building and then produce no document that carries that reference number beyond the original 4-sentence log entry? Why does the Municipal Children's Home Intake Register for September 1904 contain no record of the transfer the police log explicitly describes? Why was Otto Frenzel transferred to another facility within 3 days of filing a written account of his discovery to a posting with no documented vacancy? The honest answer is that we do not know what that child's name was, where that child came from, or where that child was taken. What we know is what the documents, read together, make impossible to explain by ordinary institutional means. The room was not in any plan. The access was not logged to any person. The child was not received by the facility to which the record says the child was sent. And the one person who put all of this into writing, the man who found the child, wrote his account, and submitted it to his supervisors, was gone from that building within 72 hours. Otto Frenzel worked at the Springfield, Missouri post office facility until 1911, when he took early retirement. His retirement paperwork is in Record Group 28. It gives no reason for early retirement and notes no health condition. He was 51 years old. He moved to a small town in southern Illinois called Oakville and lived there until his death in 1929. He does not appear in any published document, letter collection, or interview for the remaining 18 years of his life. His death notice in the Oakville Times, dated March 4, 1929, describes him as a former federal employee of many years of distinguished service. It says nothing about St. Louis. It says nothing about September 1904. It gives his survivors as a wife, 1 daughter, and a son. His son's name was Henry Frenzel. Henry worked as a schoolteacher in Oakville for 31 years. In 1961, Henry Frenzel donated a small collection of his father's personal effects to the Oakville Public Library, where they remain in a 2-box uncatalogued collection. Among those effects, according to the library's handwritten accession note, dated 1961, is a sealed envelope addressed in Otto Frenzel's handwriting to no specific recipient. The envelope has never been opened. The library's current director confirmed this in response to a research inquiry made in 2017. The inquiry is on file. The envelope is in the box. The old St. Louis post office building on Olive Street still stands. It was converted to federal court use in the 1930s and continues to function as the Thomas F. Eagleton United States Courthouse. The sub-basement level was renovated in 1938 for additional secure storage. A second renovation in 1979 altered the sub-basement layout significantly. If you contact the courthouse's facilities management office and ask about the pre-1938 sub-basement configuration, they will tell you that renovation records from that period are held by the General Services Administration and that any structural history prior to the 1938 conversion would require a formal records request. The room Otto Frenzel found on the morning of September 14, 1904, the room that appears in no blueprint, the room with the gas lamp and the ventilation shaft and the canvas postal sack in the corner, may still exist behind a wall that was built in 1938 or 1979. Or it may not. There is no document that says either way. There was never meant to be. The official history of American institutional care in the Progressive Era tells us that the late 19th and early 20th centuries were a period of genuine reform, of growing awareness of the vulnerability of children and expanding public responsibility for their welfare. What the documented record tells us is that a child was found in a locked room in a federal building in 1904, and that every institution that touched that case, the police department, the postal service, the children's home, produced a document that accounted for the child in a way that contradicted every other document. The child had no name in any record that has survived. What survived instead is a blank in a security audit, a missing case reference number, a transfer with no vacancy to fill, and a sealed envelope in an uncatalogued box in a small-town public library in southern Illinois. These records survive because bureaucracies generate paper even when they are trying to minimize it. Subscribe and share this with someone who understands that the most important histories are the ones that someone decided not to write down, the ones that only survived because a maintenance man filed a report and a schoolteacher kept his father's things. Next week, I am following the unsigned sub-basement access entry from September 14, 1904, the one logged as official business with no name and no department. There is one position in the St. Louis federal building system in 1904 whose occupant was authorized to enter any federal facility in the district without signing an access log. 1. I have the appointment record. I have the name.